Hello, 7th graders. As we prepare for the integer summative, I wanted to take some time and review the rules that we had for both adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing integers. So if you can please pull out the sheet on integer rule review. It is also attached to the same post in Google Classroom where you will find this video. And copy down the notes as we go. You may need to periodically pause the video as well. I'm going to start with our rules for multiplying and dividing integers at the bottom of the page because that is the lesson that we are just wrapping up. Remember, we came up with two rules for multiplying and dividing integers. The first one being if you have the same signs, then your answer is positive. Whereas if you have different signs, then your answer is negative. The key to these rules, though, is to remember that it only works two numbers at a time. So if you have more than two numbers, you have to work your way through them. So if I start with the problems at the bottom, I have a positive 2 and a negative 2. I have different signs, so the answer is negative 4. In number 2, I'm multiplying a negative 8 and a negative 3. I have same signs, so the answer is positive 24. Here's where I have more than two numbers, so I have to solve it two at a time. A negative 5 and a positive 4 would be negative 20 with different signs. But a negative 20 and a negative 8 have same signs, so the answer would be 160. The same applies for dividing rules. If the signs are different, then the answer is negative. If you have same signs, then the answer is positive. Again, if you have more than two numbers, we take them two at a time. 8 divided by 4 is 2, but a 2 divided by a negative 2 is a negative 1. Those are our rules for multiplying and dividing. Please be sure you have them all copied down. Now we're going to go back to adding and subtracting. Adding and subtracting were the rules that we did at the beginning of our lesson with integers. And if you remember, with our adding and subtracting rules, these were the ones where we used the chips, where we talked about how red chips are negative and yellow chips are positive. It's also the one where we circled the signs so that we could think about how the numbers were named. We knew what color chips we were dealing with. And remember, we came up with two rules for adding and subtracting. If the signs are the same, then you add the numbers together. Whereas if the signs are different, then you subtract the numbers. So for example here, if I have a negative 4 plus a negative 6, all my chips are the same color, so I add them up and they're all red, so it's a negative 20. The same can be true for subtracting. That's sometimes a tough one for people. So if I look at this example, this was a negative 7 minus 10. Well, remember that subtracting is the same as adding a negative. So we can really think of this as being a negative 7 and a negative 10. The signs are the same, so we're going to add them together, and it's negative 17. It's kind of like I'm $7 in the hole. You take 10 more away. I'm now 17 in the hole. Negative 9 plus 3, our signs are different, so we subtracted them. Here are two other examples where we had different signs and needed to subtract. I had a negative 8 plus 18, so I have a negative 8 and a positive 18. Signs are different, so I subtract. But remember, you take the sign of whatever number has the most chips. So in the case of the top one, you had more negatives, so your answer is negative. But in the bottom one, you had more positives, so the answer was positive. We did need to keep our eyes out for one specific type of problem. Remember that when we have a problem that is, for example, negative 8 minus a negative 10, remember that those two negatives together really mean like the opposite. That's another name for the negative. So this would be like the opposite of negative 10. And the opposite of a negative 10 is a positive 10. Remember, we say that it's a positive 10, not necessarily adding, because then we have to take a look at the signs. When I look at our signs, we have a positive 10 and a negative 8. The signs are different, so I'm going to have to subtract them, and I get 2. In this case, I have more positives, so my answer is a positive 2. So keep your eyes open for those. As we go through the practice problems, you could pause the video and try them on your own, or take a look at how we solved them. But a negative 9 and a positive 3 is negative 6. 5 minus a negative 2, remember that's the same as a positive, so it actually was a positive 5 and a positive 2. That's how we got 7. In number 2, you had negative 4 and a negative 2. That's negative 6. Because the signs are the same, all your chips are the same color. We put them together. That's the same as number 5 when I have a negative 6 and a negative 4. The chips are all the same color, so I add them together and I get negative 10. If you have more than 2 numbers, you need to make sure to show your steps along the way. So I have a positive 5 and a negative 2. The signs are different, so I get 3. Then I have 3 plus a negative 8. The signs are different again, so I subtract, but my answer is negative because my 8 is larger. Number 6, I have a 5 and a negative 2. The signs are the same, so I get 3. And then I have the 3 and the negative 8 that I brought down. Because again, remember, you might say, well, it's not negative, it's subtracting. But remember that subtracting is the same as adding a negative. It's just like they took out the plus sign in there, so we can think of that as being a negative 8. Signs are different, so I subtract, but I have more negatives, so my answer is negative 5. And if you look closely, you can see that these two problems are exactly the same problem. Only one uses the adding a negative, and the other one uses subtraction. But along the way, we get the same answers for both. Right? Hopefully that helps review. I would use this as a study guide when I'm practicing the review to remind me of what do I do when I'm adding and subtracting versus what do I do when I'm multiplying and dividing. All right? Thank you for taking down all these notes. Have a great day.